Alright everybody, hey, how's it going? We're checking out the PTS patch notes today for the Wrathstone DLC, and as I was looking through this, I figured that it's a pretty big update. Even though it's a dungeon DLC, there's a lot of positive changes going on here, which I just wanted to highlight some of my favorites. So I'll go through the notes quickly, and then if you have any comments, make sure you leave those down below. But let's go ahead and get started. So starting with the new item sets, there's 2 new DLC dungeons, so each dungeon's going to have 3 item sets plus a monster set. So 8 new sets there, and then they actually revamped a lot of PvP sets too, so we'll look at those next. But we're starting with the Frost Vault sets. And Icy Conjurer, a light set, you get max magicka, spell damage, spell penetration, which is pretty unique. And then for the 5-piece, applying a minor debuff to your enemy summons an Ice Wraith, dealing 18,000 frost damage over 4 seconds, and the effect can only occur every 12 seconds. That seems pretty strong as far as the damage. Almost 20k damage over 4 seconds is pretty strong. It's going to be interesting to see how players actually proc this. So it says it only applies on a minor debuff, and there's not too many of those that are easy to access. I'm trying to think of any class skills that have that. Most of the ways to proc this would probably be a weapon skill or even a weapon enchant. So it's going to be interesting to see how players figure out how to use this. Is this going to work well with like a charge trait on something like minor vulnerability or minor maim off an ice staff? That'll be interesting to see. So definitely looks strong on the tooltip, kind of going along with a lot of the DLC releases and DLC sets, lots of strong proc sets, which I guess you could go either way on. Then we got the medium armor set. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. It's something warband, medium armor, weapon crit, physical penetration. And when you deal critical damage with a light or heavy, you gain a stack of precision, increasing weapon critical by 129 with 10 stacks maximum. At max stacks, you also gain minor force. Okay, so that's pretty interesting. The weapon critical is not a lot, 10% weapon crit at max maybe. So it's not a lot, but then you do get the minor force. So maybe for a solo situation, maybe for PvP or VMA, something like that, this could be interesting. Heavy set, Mighty Glacier. Max stamina, max magicka, okay, I like that. Stamina recovery, magicka recovery, I like that as well. So you could use this on either a stamina or a magicka build. And when you cast a snare or mobilize, you gain major resolve, major ward for you and 11 group members, okay. And this effect can occur every 10 seconds. So kind of a support set, I guess. I don't see this being used a lot in PvP, more of a PvE set, a tank set probably. Interesting though. Okay, here's the monster set, Stonekeeper. 1-piece stamina, magicka, and health. So that's interesting. They've never done that before where they actually have 3 bonuses on the 1-piece for a monster set. They've done 2 before on Dummy House. And this is actually a little bit less stats overall. So, okay, not bad. I mean, you could pair that 1-piece with a 1-piece Dummy House and get a lot of stats, actually. But for the 2-piece, when you block, you gain an energy charge up to 1 stack per second. When you gain 6 charges, you release the energy, restoring 5,000 stamina and magicka and healing for 5,000. Okay, pretty strong, sustain-wise. But it does have a cooldown, so you cannot regain new charges for 14 seconds afterwards. Okay, interesting. So kind of a sustain or a support type monster set. That's interesting. So our other dungeon in Wrathstone, Depths of Minotaur, we've got Auroran's Thunder, the light set. You get max health, spell damage, spell penetration. And when you damage a nearby enemy with a single target ability, you summon a cone of lightning for 3 seconds. dealing 1200 shock damage every half second. So you have 6 ticks of that, so it's pretty good damage pressure. And it says a cone of lightning, so it's not single target. It sounds like it's an AoE effect, so I wonder how wide the AoE is. If that's a wide effect, that could be pretty cool. But if it's too narrow, then it could be kind of useless. Alright, the medium armor set. Scavenging Demise, weapon damage, weapon critical. And when you deal critical poison damage to an enemy, summon the Scavenging Maw, whoever that is, after 2 seconds, dealing 7,000 poison damage and inflicting minor vulnerability for 15 seconds. Okay, so this is pretty interesting. The minor vulnerability is hard to proc on the stamina setup, so that's cool. That gives you access to a new debuff that you probably wouldn't have otherwise. And it has a cooldown of 10 seconds, which is not too bad. And the only thing is you have to deal critical poison damage. So you're going to be restricted to poison injection, maybe venom claw. So it might be cool on a stamina Dragon Knight. We'll see. Frozen Watcher, the heavy armor setup. Stamina, health, stamina. Okay. Summon a blizzard while blocking, inflicting 1,000 frost damage every 1 second, and a 15% chance of inflicting chilled. Okay. So you have to be blocking. It doesn't say blocking an attack, like this other one said blocking an attack. The Stonekeeper set. So this is just activated on blocking, which is interesting. Okay, maybe a niche set for a Warden, maybe? The Monster set. Symphony of Blades, 2% healing done. I'm not a huge fan of that set bonus on monster pieces, but whatever. The 2-piece, when you heal an ally whose primary resource is under 50%, grant them Meridia's Favor, restoring 2,325 of that resource every second for 6 seconds with an 18-second cooldown. So that's a lot of resources. 2,300 every 1 second. So every 2 seconds, that's like almost 5,000 for 6 seconds. That's almost like too much. That's a lot of resources. Okay. Interesting. So the monster sets are really not damage focused this dungeon round. It's more of support and sustain, so that's cool. That's definitely gonna fill some gaps, I think, for different builds. Okay, on to PvP. Battleground and Cyrodiil updates. So there's a new Battleground map. Let's see. So they mix it up a little bit. So there's 2 different maps based on the game type, which is interesting. So Capture the Relic, Domination, Chaos Ball have one version of the map, and then Crazy King and Deathmatch has the other version. And it says certain parts of the map are available or closed off depending on the game mode. So that's cool. That's cool. It'll be interesting to see how different each version of the map is. So they are adding weapon styles for Battleground outfits. So they had these styles originally. Pit Demon, Stormlord, Fire Drake. They had those as armor styles, and now you can get the weapon styles, so that's pretty cool. And then they actually updated a lot of the older item sets that were in the game from Cyrodiil. Some of these were really old, really old. This Deadly Strike set, let's check it out. So it was a 3-piece bonus, max health, weapon critical, and now weapon damage, weapon critical, weapon damage, and the 5-piece increases your damage, your physical, bleed, poison, and disease damage over time abilities. So that's the key right there. It's buffing your dot abilities by 14%, which seems pretty strong. That's a nice 5-piece bonus. It's going to be strong on a lot of setups for sure. Buffer of the Swift. I definitely never use this set. So the new bonus is, I believe this is a light armor set. So the new bonus is going to be max magicka, physical, and spell resistance, and reduce damage taken from players by 10%. Okay. So I think that's pretty close to fortified brass. What fortified brass has like the 5,200 something, which might, that's either 8% or 10%. So this might give you a slightly more resistance. And then fortified brass has a health bonus. This has a magicka bonus, and it's light armor. So that's interesting. It's going to be an interesting option for like a light armor Dragon Knight or magicka Dragon Knight, magicka Templar, something like that. That'd be cool. The Lessian Order used to give you 3 extra seconds of CC immunity. Now we have physical resistance, spell resistance, max health, and increases your health recovery by 1% for the sum total physical and spell resistance. So if you had, let's say you had 30k physical and 30k health, that's 60k resistances. 1% of 60k would be 600 health recovery. So, okay, not bad. So you can spec into resistance and get a little bit of extra health recovery on top of it. Not too bad. Beckoning Steel, this one was interesting. So the new bonuses are spell resistance, health, physical resistance, and then for the 5-piece, generate an aura that causes you and 11 group members to take 10% less damage from projectiles. That's a pretty cool support set. It's gonna depend on how big the area effect is though, right? If it's only like a 4-meter range or less, not gonna be that helpful. But if it has a decent size area, that's gonna be cool. That's cool for support builds, healer builds, tank builds. I might use that on some niche builds. Curse Eater used to reduce the duration of negative effects by 20%, which was pretty useless. And now they updated the 5-piece so that when you heal yourself or an ally, you remove 2 negative effects from them. And if it was removed, you restore 150 magicka. 2-second cooldown. So this is really strong on almost any class, stamina or magicka, because you'll have, you know, vigor. If you're stamina, if you're magicka, you could just use rapid regen and proc this every 2 seconds. Yeah, this is a really strong defensive set for sure in PvP. It kind of negates some of the dot builds that are starting to be pretty big in the meta. So I wonder if that's what it's meant for. If it's meant to counter dot builds completely. I don't know. That might be a little bit too powerful. We'll see. Okay, the Sentry set. Let's see. This was updated, so it's max stamina, weapon damage, weapon critical, an extra weapon damage, and when you begin to crouch, you gain stealth detection. Okay. Kind of a cool extra effect that you just proc by entering crouch, I guess. Interesting. Very niche though, right? Okay, so we're going to jump down to combat changes, and there's a lot of stuff going on here that I just wanted to point out. So, first major change here is that blocking a heavy attack is going to, if you get your heavy attack blocked, you're going to restore half the resources that you would normally. Used to be 0. So this was really a way to shut down heavy attack, heavy armor builds in PvP. Now they're going to get half the sustain, so they're going to increase their sustain quite a bit. So I don't know. I mean, this could mean that heavy armor is going to be a lot more viable. We'll have to see how that plays out. Under pets, pets now inherit bonuses and derive stats. So things like crit hit chance, crit hit multipliers, champion points, and other percent damage or healing amp. So this is quite powerful for pet builds. Really interesting that they're buffing pets again in ESO. We'll see if this ends up being too powerful or not. Another major change here. Enchants for one-handed weapons will now be half the potency of those on two-handed weapons. And the example they give is an enchant could be 4,000 damage on a two-hander and 2,000 damage on a one-handed weapon, but still the same cooldown. So I guess this makes sense because you can still have two enchants on a dual-wield setup. And it was, let's be honest, it was powerful to have two full enchants as a dual-wield setup versus having the same damage on one enchant if you were running a two-handed weapon. So this makes sense to me. I don't know if they need to balance some of the two-handed weapon skills a little bit more to make up for this, because that enchant damage definitely was big both in PvP and PvE, so we'll see. So it fixed with Empower, and then class abilities. Class changes that I wanted to point out. So Dragon Knight, not too much here, just an issue with spiked armor got fixed, and Obsidian Shard. Same thing with Nightblade, nothing major here. But Sorcerer got some major changes that are pretty interesting. Number one, Boundless Storm, the cost was reduced by 34%, and this was a very good change. This skill is expensive to run, and it really wasn't worth it after they nerfed the speed. Because you wouldn't cast this every 4 seconds. There's just too much cost associated with it. So hopefully that will make this skill more worthwhile to run, and that you could use it every 4 seconds if you needed to for speed. But this was the major change here. A complete rework of Implosion, which I didn't see this coming. It's been complained about forever. And they finally did it. I can't believe they finally did it. So they completely reworked the passive for Implosion. And the way it works now is interesting. So I think they break it down here. They're calling it a reverse execute. So at 100% health, your target takes 10% more damage. 90 to 99, they take 9%. 80 to 89, they take 8%, and so on. Down to when they're below 10%, it's a 1% damage boost. So Implosion no longer going to be a thing. Especially in PvP, this is going to be very interesting to see how sorcerers respond to this. It's an interesting solution to a problem. What else can you say? We'll see how it plays out. Okay, so weapon changes. This was interesting as well. So heavy attacks, they reduce the bleed from the axe by 12%, and they increase the damage of the sword, the two-hand sword, to 6%. So I believe this was 18%, this was 5%, this got reduced, this got increased, just to have a better balance overall. So I like that. In a lot of builds, the axe bleed was just overpowering, and the two-hand passive was underperforming, so this should make them more in line with each other. They did the same thing with dual wield to make those match. For the bow, they finally fixed the stun from Scattershot, where it was less responsive to CC break. We'll see if that's true or not. That's always been pretty buggy, but if they did truly fix that, that will be nice. And this is one of my favorite changes that are just thrown in here. You might have missed it. Ancient Knowledge. Remove the requirement of having the staff ability slotted to gain the passives. So the main passives you have for this is Flame Staff, you get 8% single target damage. Lightning Staff, you'd get 8% AoE damage, but you had to have an ability slotted, which sometimes you just didn't want to have one on a build for whatever reason. I had a Dragonite build, Flame Staff, where I really wanted the passive, but Dragonites have great skills. I didn't need actually any of the Destro skills on my front bar, but I had to slot the ultimate to get that passive, so that will no longer be needed. Super excited for this update. I think this was the only weapon that actually made you slot an ability, so now that's changed. Very cool. I'm looking forward to that. It's going to open up a lot of freedom for Destruction Staff builds. All right, and we did have the race passives in this patch as well, and this is not news. It's been out for a week or so, so I'm not going to go into detail about this, other than to say I do like what's here for the most part. I like the approach that they're taking to balance, from being focused on percentage gains and then moving into flat stats and special abilities that go with the theme of the race. I do really like that approach. I appreciate it. There are just a few things here that I wanted to point out which I think don't make sense or could be changed for the better. So one of those is High Elf Spell Charge reduces damage taken by 5% while you are using an ability with a cast or channel time. So I appreciate that they're trying to make the race unique with this passive, but it's just so niche. There's so few abilities with a channel time that it's going to be hard to use this, to make use of this, unless you're a High Elf Templar. So it kind of makes, especially for PvP, it makes High Elf the way to go for Templar because you get more damage reduction. They just put in a passive for Templar last patch where they get 8% minor protection while channeling jabs, and now you have this on top of that. So I don't like this passive. I wish they would just change it to something else that wasn't so niche, because what I'm noticing on some of these is you're either going to use the passive all the time, you're going to build for it, and it's going to be maybe a little bit overpowering, or you're never going to use it at all. Another example of that is the new Wood Elf passive here called Hunter's Eye. After you roll dodge, you gain 20% movement speed for 3 seconds. This is another one of those examples where it's either going to be OP or you're never going to use it. Like in PvP on a Wood Elf Nightblade or Wood Elf Stem Sork, this is going to be crazy. You already have 30% movement speed when you use a bow, and then you tack on 20% on top of that. You have 50% movement speed for 3 seconds. That's insane. And they just spent like a whole patch getting rid of movement speed buffs, and they added one back in. I like the idea of giving each race something unique, but it seemed like they were just looking for something and they threw it in without really thinking about it. I would like to see this change to something else. I don't know exactly what, but I don't think the balance is right on those two specifically. High Elf Spell Charge and then Wood Elf, the Hunter's Eye roll dodge thing. Not a fan. Otherwise, I think overall it's pretty good. So this video is getting a little bit long. I'm not going to talk more about the race passives. If you guys would like to see a video from me on that, let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know what your thoughts are on this patch. Were you surprised at any of these updates? I actually was. I didn't think it would be this big of a deal. There's lots of interesting, juicy stuff coming out in the Dungeon DLC, Wrathstone. So thank you all for watching. I hope you feel a little bit more informed, and I'll see you guys around in the next video. Thanks.